Hi, I'm Bret. You're the internet. We're here hanging out. This is my weekly live stream. If you haven't been here before, welcome. Usually I have guests or a co-host, but once a month, they all take a break, and it's just me. And I'm here for your questions. So I've got things I can talk about. Lots of things I can talk about because I do this constantly. I live in this world every day. But I want to get your questions answered. So I'm going to just take a minute, talk about a few things I'm working on. And while I'm waiting for your wonderful questions or conversation starters or things that you're working on, like tell me what you're doing. What are you working on? Let's talk about it. I just ended a live stream an hour ago with some new friends. Well, let me see if I have the link over here. At the, over here. At the Equinix Developers channel. I'm going to put this link in the chat. Maybe, Nubo's still around. It's the post-stream stream. It's the stream after the stream. Or maybe it was the stream before the stream. So we're over there hanging out. That was a fun time. Ooh, my video is really blurry there at that moment. Let's hope it gets better. But that was a fun chat. We talked about AI. Yeah, I don't know what's up with my video there. It's like Chris is all looking good, and looks like I'm on like a 1999 webcam. That one. So that was a fun stream. I'd not streamed with them before, and thanks Walt for the invite. And then we had a pre and post stream that wasn't recorded, and was also a lot of fun. So I think the ability for us to find new friends and hang out with people on the internet is awesome. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's magical. All right, so I brought tea today because we might go long. We might hang out longer than a little normal, longer than the 60 minutes that I normally have on the show. So you might be wondering, like, who's going to be on the show? Well, I have a list. So next week is going to be Garden. Do you know about Garden.io? They do a lot of things, but they're an automation solution. It's hard for me to nail down. So that's what we're going to do next week on the show is talk about Garden.io and have them on to talk about their CI solution and all the other things that it can do. And I've heard that their name has been dropped for years in my worldview, and I never use them. So I want to learn. This is why I have this show, so I can learn too. And what else? What else have I got on the list? Nirmal will be back next week as my co-host. And then after that, we're going to have Uffizi on to talk about ephemeral environments, preview environments, GitHub Actions for spinning up PR-based Kubernetes environments or even Compose environments for Docker Compose. Josh from Uffizi is going to be on. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. We've also got a cloud native Q&A where Nirmal and I come on. Basically, just show up every Thursday. Or subscribe to the newsletter. In fact, I just shipped another newsletter last night. Let me bring that up. You can go to bret.news for that. And last night at dark:30, technically it was today, I shipped a new newsletter. And the topic, besides all the other things going on, like this show right now that we're in, and the podcast that was released last week on Kasten for backups of Kubernetes, and then I just kind of go down a rabbit hole of ranting about basically AI, right? LLMs for development. GitHub Copilot chat was the feature that I talked about. And it has significantly improved my GitHub Copilot experience. And for a lot of us, I mean, it turns out there's a significant portion of developers that are already using things like ChatGPT to help them develop. I wanted to take a project essentially where I took a language I was not super familiar with in terms of writing code in it, avoid trying to use Stack Overflow, Google, and YouTube to learn it, and write a program end to end. Granted, it was only 200 lines of code when it was all said and done, and only use a single tool or maybe a couple of tools. So I ended up using a little bit of ChatGPT and then realized that Copilot Chat was using GPT-4 already. So I just used the built-in VS Code beta feature, which is Copilot Chat. It's an additional feature on top of Copilot. And it answered several significant questions for me. Could I look like a junior developer in a language I'm not familiar with on the first day of writing? Well, not technically my first day, because I have written a few lines of Golang, but never outside of a course for my own use in a real world project. And I haven't done it for 3 or 4 years. So I was definitely unfamiliar. I definitely wouldn't have got past, the first 10 lines without maybe some Googling or IntelliSense or something, some hints. And I used a built-in experience called the GitHub Copilot Chat that's inside the code editor. And I just had a conversation about the code. And it kept the whole history of my conversation. I probably asked 50 different questions to eventually build this little utility. And it's a functioning tool. It's something that it didn't exist. 4 hours later, it was finished. And it had a 100-line README and a 200-line block of Go code, and it works. So I dumped my thoughts in a newsletter. You can sign up for that newsletter free. Here is a link to that. And that was a fun little project. I had wanted to do that a while, and I didn't want it to be contrived. I wanted it to be something where I was really using the code, and I was really trying to make something that wasn't just a to-do app or something that I wasn't going to use or care about. I wanted it to be something that I really needed, and I had come up with, in the moment, I had realized that in the future, I'd like to give out custom certificates for my courses. So I would like to have a tool, and in order to do that, right, to give out custom certificates that maybe are auto-generated or bulk-generated, I needed to have an image manipulation program that would apply text to a stock image or a template image. And there's services out there that do this stuff. They cost money or they suck. And I didn't want to go down the road of like ImageMagick and Node.js or Python or something like that. And I was lucky enough that I could do all this stuff with the standard library in Go, which it's an amazing feat for Go to have so much of that stuff built into the standard library that I could essentially avoid all third-party. I'm from the Node.js world where I would have had to have like 15 different libraries as node modules, as dependencies. And so it was much easier in Go. It was much less code. And it was all written by an LLM. I did have to do a lot of massaging and error correcting, and I had to do a lot of work. So we've definitely got years worth of effort ahead of us for these tools to spit out perfect code, perfect modern code every time. But regardless, it probably would have taken me 20 hours to do what I did in 4 hours with an LLM. So it proved to me a couple of things. One, yes, this is a tool that I will always want in my IDE from now until the end of time. I will always use it. I don't see a need. I don't even see a use case in any open source project or any code project or any Git project where I wouldn't use an LLM now. Once it's in the IDE, it's not an other thing I have to go get. I don't have to go to ChatGPT. It's just right there in my editor. It's waiting for questions. It's like the blank screen. Do you want to play a game from Matthew Broderick, right? So it's that kind of experience. So I highly recommend if you can get into the labs. So there's a sign up list. If you're interested at all in Copilot, or if you have Copilot and you don't have chat yet, there is somewhere in here a link to get on here's the wait list. So I'm going to copy that link. So there's a wait list for people to get on Copilot Chat, which is essentially ChatGPT 4 in your editor, in this case specifically VS Code, and it has awareness of your project, and it retains history. So when you even reopen VS Code and go back to that project, and you go to the tab for VS Code Chat, for Copilot Chat, it will just bring right back up to where you left off. And so it remembers the history. It knows everything that you were in there. It has all the tokens, I guess, ready to go back into memory. Anyway, it was a really wonderful experience, and I wrote about it. So check out that newsletter. That's one thing. Before we get to questions, a couple other things on the list. If you didn't know, this actually turns into a podcast. That podcast is over on my website, podcast.bretfisher.com. And we just launched another episode on Castin. The podcast is an edited down version of this show, but I don't take the Q&As and put them in there yet. We're still trying to figure that one out. This is all just guests. So it's all about tooling and services and cloud native container stuff. And I even made a longer name for the thing because I wanted to have all the buzzwords in there. So it's got a very long show title, but you can check that out. You can also check out the course that I continue to talk about because this is the year that I'm experimenting with live courses. And this one is on Argo CD for GitOps Kubernetes deployments, which is the only way I deploy stuff to Kubernetes now. And GitHub Actions, which is my preferred CI solution or just automation solution. You can sign up for that. Links are all below in the description. You can sign up for that. We're going to run the next group in early December, so between holidays in America, and you can sign up. You can't actually pay yet because we haven't announced the date, but we're planning on early December. You can jump over there and get on the waiting list so that you find out about the next cohort. So we've done this twice this year, and we're planning the next one. Come check it out. People love it. The whole point of this course is to get you specifically deep into these tools with advice, multiple Q&A sessions with me and the rest of the people learning it. It's all about learning together with other professionals trying to implement these tools in real time. So the goal by the end is that you're actually using it, not just that you've learned it in a sample project, but that you're actually trying to use these tools in your day-to-day. So go check that out. Of course, you can join our Discord server. I haven't checked yet. We're about to hit 15,000 subscribers. Thank you all to those of you that support, whether you're a member here on YouTube, you get membership into special channels here. If you get membership here on YouTube, you can get that stuff into Discord, or you can go into Discord and boost the server there. I think we're actually full on boost though. You can jump over to my website, become a member there. All the different memberships, Patreon, they all feed into, you get extra features on the Discord server. So we're all chatting on the Discord server. You can see we have a list of events coming up, including today, as well as our High Fiver chat, which if you're in the High Fivers membership plan, you get access to that once a month. And we have the Swarm fans meetup for those of you loving Swarm. That's coming up next month, the 1st of September. And we all hang out every day in this server. This is where I'm at. Now that we've had the debacle of all of the social medias, and now there's like 5 different places I have to hang out, and all my friends are split between all the different services now. This is like my preferred place to hang out. So thank you all for hanging out there, helping others. We do get a lot of new people recently, a lot of new questions. So I'm extremely grateful for those of you trying to help new people. We get new people in there every day. It's amazing to see the community growing there. And there's a group of us, the moderators, as well as some of you that aren't moderators, that are just doing a great job of keeping it a safe community, a wonderful place to learn and help others. So thank you. Lastly, we have the newsletter. That's Bret.news. I sent you the link to the last newsletter. And if you didn't know, I still have a loot box. So you can get merch from the store. Right now there's a sale going on, so 20% off everything, including the Foxy shirts, including my favorite shirt, the Sneaker Net. You can also get it on a mug, like this mug right here. Oh, wait. Got to turn it around. Like this mug right here. The DevOps. I love DevOps. And so, yeah. I make no money off that, by the way. That money goes all to the artist that creates the designs. So if you're an artist or you know an artist and you want to collaborate with me on designs, anything that sells in the store goes all to the designer. So, all right, let's get into some questions. Eric says the reggae horn. Yeah, I for anyone who subscribes as a membership, I give you the reggae horn, and you're welcome. So thanks for having that run in the background. Maybe that's how I start every time. It's like we're off to the races, and it startles you, and then if you're in an office building, then that would be kind of embarrassing, I think. Just Me asks recommendations for Rust plus DevOps in microservice application. Well, I'm not a Rust developer. I mean, I hear Rust is great. So what do you need to know? Like, you build the Rust binary, you put it in a container, you run it on your microservice. Sounds good. I like your idea. To the chill music. Yeah, in fact, I was thinking of playing some more music today. I was in the mood for some background music. And let me know if that sounds good. I probably can't hear it very well, but it's turned down low. I like to have some grooves when I'm chilling all by myself and I'm not interviewing other people. So let me know how that goes. Hello, Martin. Back. Martin is one of the regulars here all the time, along with Eric. On to Q. Martin's here. We got 2 Martins in the room. Namaste, Riddick. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Christian, learning to create Kubernetes operators programmatically with Golang. Nice. Yeah, Kubernetes operators. I'm assuming you're using the SDK, the operator, Red Hat operator kit, which I've never actually used. I'm just curious if that's still a thing or if people are still using that. We had lots of fun. Nuba was from the other stream, so... Yeah, Nuba, I had set it to 720p. I had manually set it up to 720p 30, so I don't know. We should have tested. But that's what happens when you just YOLO the live streams. All right. Unsecused here. Let's talk about this. I recently had started to have a gripe with Copilot, ChatGPT being used 100% of the time for juniors. I feel like there is something you don't learn in terms of code sense. Right. So in that newsletter, I wrote that my feelings about some of that stuff. I talk about that it's not replacement for a course. It's not a replacement for a mentor. So it's a supplemental tool, in my opinion. This reminds me, this discussion essentially goes back to the beginning of time, to how we learn, and senior people worried that junior people won't learn everything the right way or the way they learned it or whatever. This has been since the beginning of code. Like, this is not a new problem. This is just the next iteration. It is going to be fine because, I didn't learn the right way or the best way when I learned things either. So the only thing that keeps me on the rails sometimes is the fact that I've been doing this 30 years. So I have enough experience that anything new to me isn't really completely new, because I understand the fundamentals. I understand the things that are related to it. But the reality is we still need, what do they say? There's two programming jobs in the world for every programmer. So the reality is, until we fix that, whether it's low code, no code, LLM code, regardless of the solution to try to get more people in with less experience than you, we're going to have this challenge of people that don't have a complete worldview of any framework or any language or any service or cloud system or whatever. And that doesn't, right? There's nothing new about that problem. And we still have all these industry solutions to that, right? Pair programming, mentorship, team building exercises, working, all that stuff is there. And I think LLM is just going to be another one of those things where it's just a new factor in the tooling space. It doesn't replace traditional training, in my opinion. I looked at the approach I took for this project of mine last week, and I thought about it afterwards of, did it teach me everything I needed to know about Go? Absolutely not. It only solved the problem I was trying to solve. It didn't teach me anything else. For example, there was it doesn't have, like, Golang doesn't have a tertiary. Is that how you say it? I always say that word wrong. It doesn't have that operator structure with the one-liner to replace a for each. And nicely, when I actually asked for it, I asked for that equivalent of my for each statement, because I thought I had a for each statement that was 10 lines or whatever, and I thought it was unnecessarily verbose. I asked for that operator, and ChatGPT explained to me why Golang doesn't have it. That was actually a really cool, in the moment, life lesson around that particular feature in Go and that fact that it doesn't exist. Of course, I hope it doesn't exist. Maybe it was hallucinating to me and telling me the fake news. So it does have elements where it can teach you in real time, and you can learn from things you're doing with an LLM already. And this stuff is getting rapidly better all the time. There's also a new labs project from GitHub for what's it called? GitHub Copilot Labs that does things like help you improve your code, create documentation for this code, create tests for this code. So there's already very specific applications of these LLMs into your code base that will solve some of these specific verticals like testing and docs and improving code quality. But the reality is that at least with my courses, like I would say the high-end good courses, there's a lot of the why built into the course. And I leave a lot of stuff out that you probably don't need to learn. And LLM isn't really doing that yet. Like it's teaching you what you need to know to answer the question, and you have to know how to ask good questions, which means you can't just be a brand new developer on day one, because it would take you a long time with an LLM to say, how do I create a program in Python? And then it may not give you everything you need to know to do that. It might leave stuff out. It might leave out best practices. It does tend to have opinions, right? And so those opinions can be wrong, and it would need to be vetted by humans. And so I think it's going to be some time before we can really lean on it as the only way to do and learn something. But man, it saved me a lot of time. Like not just keystrokes, but I didn't visit Stack Overflow once. I don't think. I might have done it once because the answer I got from the LLM was wrong or it didn't work. And I tried it a couple different ways. And so then I Googled around and I might have landed on Stack Overflow once. But one of the concerns I actually have about all this stuff, and I put into the newsletter, I put this in the newsletter that I'm a little worried. There's actually a link here to a video over on the Firebase, or Fireship rather, not Firebase, but Fireship channel around the like recently Stack Overflow usage has rapidly declined. And if this is true, if this video is true, yeah, let's see if I can find there we go. Yeah. Oh. So, well, get rid of that. So yeah, if this is seriously what's happening to Stack Overflow traffic, we're about to enter a world where the things that are teaching the AIs may not exist, and the AIs have to learn from themselves, which we've now learned is a really bad model because they end in despair and crappy LLMs. So we need the humans to feed the machine, and if the humans stop doing the work because it's way more convenient to just use the AI, there's a scenario where we're going to end up in a pit of despair, and that the LLMs, basically the robots, won't be useful anymore because there's no humans outputting information to train them. And we were talking on the previous stream today about what if the future looks like a lot of the jobs that we replace with AI are just jobs to work for the AI to ensure that the AI input for the rest of us. So, I mean, maybe it creates more jobs than it replaces, but those are not going to be a lot of fun jobs. So, yeah, I'm not worried about it, Martin, I guess is the answer to your question. I think that we will adapt, and we will solve the problem that we've always solved with new people coming in that don't understand the fundamentals. For 30 years, I've been ranting about people coming into development not fully understanding distributed computing, the IP, IPv4, IPv6, subnetting, packet sizes, virtual Ethernet devices, like all the things that I had to learn in the 90s and 2000s, right? What's the difference between a hub and a switch? That's really important. What's a broadcast domain? These are all important things that we've outsourced and that devs don't have to know anymore. I used to think they were really important to know, so I would make sure that my team members knew it. It would be a part of the interview process to make sure they understood the fundamentals of distributed computing, even before we called it that, because everything we put on a server was used over an IP network. I felt like it was important because I had to learn that in the 90s. I had to install IP drivers into Windows because Windows didn't have IP by default. Pro tip for those of you around like Eric that have probably seen this stuff. Not a pro tip, but a trivia question would be, what version of Windows first had TCP IP as an optional feature? It wasn't the first version of Windows, nor the second, nor technically the third. So, curious. Let me see what other questions here. So yeah, I guess the thing on the AI to wrap that up is like, I am very concerned that we are not going to keep up with the needs the AI has, or like our usage of it is going to outpace our understanding and feeding of it and the care of it. But I trust us. Look, I think we'll figure it out eventually. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Ulath? Sorry if that's totally wrong. With a CKA certification and experience in dev, what positions can one apply for to gain more experience with Kubernetes? Okay, so you have experience in dev. Well, I would say that you want to just look for jobs where you're in a dev team that has to manage their own Kubernetes cluster, which would usually mean smaller dev teams, right? If you start applying to big companies, big enterprises, large companies with formal operations teams that manage the clusters for you, the only experience as a dev you might get is help in writing the YAML for your manifests, your Helm charts, your customize. But if you want to get more into Kubernetes, you're going to take your dev skills and lean into the DevOps arena or the SRE arena, where you maybe have to worry about managing infrastructure. And the thing is there is 1,000 different job descriptions or more for the world of dev. So there's a lot of jobs that is just purely dev focused. You don't have to write any YAML in that job. And then there are lots of teams that I work with where they're small teams. They only have 10 developers or 5 developers. So they have to manage their own infrastructure, and they use Kubernetes that's managed by maybe a cloud or something. So they don't have to roll their own. So I would say look for that. And there's plenty of jobs like that. There's plenty of companies that are still looking to hire junior Kubernetes people, and there always will be. There always will be. So there are jobs for people that know Kubernetes well that aren't as great developers. There's jobs for people that are developers that aren't great at Kubernetes. But the fact that you already have CKA, that tells me that you sound like you want to get more into the ops realm and then the DevOps realm. Then that's true. I think there's probably lots of jobs out there for you. I'm not applying for those, so I don't have any off the top of my head that specifically that you can look for. But every client I work with, there's that person that's a developer that ended up loving DevOps and has kind of pivoted more into the AI automations, or the build automation, the deployment automation, building the clusters or managing the clusters in some fashion, and building Helm charts, looking at tooling like Argo CD to run on top of Kubernetes, picking the ingress provider because they like Envoy or they like traffic or whatever, and they're helping choose that for the cluster. So there's plenty of jobs like that I've seen people working with. So you should hopefully be able to find one, and good luck to you. Where do I get these spiffy shirts? Well, this one is Bonobos, something like that. There's also this right here. I think that's where I got this shirt. And it's stretchy. That's an off-topic question, but thank you for the compliment. I like it. It's a spiffy t-shirt. Welcome to the Smooth Jazz DevOps round. That's right. We're on the lo-fi jazz. Hello, Roberto. Thanks, WebFTP Master. I really appreciate you appreciating. The best website for resources to do the live projects. The thing I do is I just search GitHub. I search for GitHub repositories that have examples or There's a Google Cloud one. There's the Sock Shop, the Search Sock Shop. There's a lot of stuff like that are demo apps that are of significant complexity that will force you to learn about things like secrets and persistent stories. And you can just search Google for that. I'm sorry, not Google, but GitHub. So just don't bother with Google necessarily. Just go to GitHub. Although a lot of times Google search is better at searching GitHub than GitHub's own search. And just start looking for projects like that. Google Cloud has one. There's the To-Do app, the MVC To-Do app, which allows you to compare frameworks. That's not really a great one for like learning Kubernetes and deployment stuff, but there's a significant number. And I bet you some people in chat will have recommendations on ones for you to look for. I don't know that there's necessarily a website that has a list. There probably is, but I don't know of that. I just know of the projects themselves. Docker has a couple. Docker Samples is a GitHub organization that has several, multi-container projects for you to test out your, deployment and DevOps skills. So go check that out. Sinclair Basic, classic. I had one of those. I had several of those books. How does DevOps improve collaboration between development and operations teams? Well, DevOps is the goal of DevOps is to improve collaboration between development and operations teams. So how do you do that? There's a great book you should read. There's a whole line of books, actually. I think it's under itrevolution.com. The book's name is DevOps Handbook. You can probably start with that. And that will give you a lot of... They do basically explaining the processes and the human culture of DevOps, and then they give you examples of companies that have done various things with DevOps, and then from there there'll be other books from that. So go over here, itrevolution.com. I'll put that in chat, and they have a whole list of books. If you go under books, there's a ton of books. And they're on a lot of different topics, everything from agile to developer stuff, operation stuff, fictional stories like the Unicorn Project, the Phoenix Project. These are sort of fictional novels written around the problems that DevOps tries to solve in modern team and culture in tech. So a lot of those books are good. I've only read a few of them, but the one that I'm specifically talking about that you might start with is the DevOps Handbook. It's actually just had a second edition released, so it's just a couple years old technically if you get the second edition. And it's well vetted, well done, and it's a good intro into why DevOps. Oh, I missed some of these. Yeah, co-teaching with these AI tools. It would be an interesting pairing session to have someone using ChatGPT or Copilot, and I'm pairing with them, but they're taking the AI's advice. And let's pretend for a moment I'm the senior developer, which I'm not, but let's just pretend I am. And the junior developer is using that, and I'm pairing with them, and we're probably going to be using AI. Of course, the more senior developer you are, the more likely you're not going to use AI because you can think and code fast enough that you're writing it as fast as it would take for you to formulate the question, wait for the AI's response. You have to evaluate the response, see if it's correct. It's probably got something in it that's wrong, so you need to tweak it. And that takes probably just as much as writing the code if you're fluent. But that would be the senior developer that doesn't need to search the internet for constantly on, how do I do that exact, thing in this sort of esoteric feature that's more than the basic language features, or what's that library I need to manipulate an image? I can't remember which one I need to include. Those are things that a senior developer would just have drilled into their head, and it would be interesting. I still think that there's a net win there on AI, but so that way, like if you have a senior junior developer pairing situation, instead of the senior explaining things or telling them what to write because they don't know it offhand, there may be writing, there may be writing it with the AI, and then the pair is able to pay less attention, maybe, if you have sort of a situation like that. If you're two equals and you're just pairing together, because it's maybe complex and you're theorizing on exactly how you want everything to be structured, that's probably not something that AI is going to help a ton with. I did ask during my experiment, several times, give me 5 ways to improve this code page or this code file. And it kept coming up with generics, and then I would drill in and be specific and say, how could I improve this case statement or whatever? And it had mixed results. Like, it wasn't always great, and I kind of had to use my background in just 20 plus years of programming to figure out if it was full of crap. And then it would sometimes change its mind on, do the vars go in a separate, do they go outside of the main, not the class, but the main program, the main function, and there's stylization features, but then the IntelliSense is kind of jumping in and helping make sure that my code is formatted and styled correctly. And anyway, it's amazing how far we've come in 15 years, because I feel like that 15 years ago, like, none of this was possible, and I would have spent a lot of my time reading and researching. And then when you get out of context and you have to go read and research something because you don't remember exactly how to do that thing, or you're looking for the library that needs to do that thing, you always end up wasting a little bit of time going down rabbit holes that, like, maybe that was a waste of time. That blog article was old. It wasn't the right one. It didn't really answer my question. I have to research 5 different places. And I feel like that AI can really save with that as well, because even though it's not always correct, it's getting you, you can immediately reply and say, hey, that didn't work. Or this line, it erred on this line. That's what a lot of what I was doing, was feeding the error message back into the LLM. What I would love to see, I already have all these ideas for how this stuff is going to get better. And hopefully, they're all doing it for us, so I'm sure this is all stuff that's not new to them. But like, imagine if I'm writing with AI in my VS Code, it's giving me advice. I can click a button that actually copies the. I don't even have to do a copy paste. I just click a button and it pushes it right into where my carriage return is at, or my character's at. And if it generates an error, because after every save I want to do a run, and it generates an error, then that error should be fed right back into the LLM, and it goes, oh, you got an error. This is what I think is wrong. And so what I was having to do was copy and paste the errors out that were caused by it giving me bad code, feeding it back to it. Then it would correct the code or figure out that line, and I would then paste that back in. And so yeah, you can imagine that workflow is not ideal. It would have been, maybe you could argue that one way is to always give us perfect code, but I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen in the near future. So maybe we have the debug process as just built right in, so that as soon as it sort of crashes the app, it knows the language, it knows the tool I have to run to get the program to run. So if it sees the output, automatically gives me a response. I don't have to actually ask it a question about every error. Anyway, that could be really, that loop of your human workflow could really be improved with a fancier LLM. Yeah, Eric's talking about like LLMs too. We were talking about this on the previous stream, where one of the real problems is right now is a lot of this stuff is years old already, right? Like the models are years old, and we're all dealing with we're all tip of the spear people. Like, we're here talking about cloud native DevOps. There's people that still haven't adopted Docker yet. We've been all doing this for 20 years, or 10 years rather, with containers. And I don't want to know about Golang 117, right, or 116, the way that it was done then. And that's what these LLMs sometimes know. So I'm always finding that, especially when it's something where like Node is really bad at this, or me asking it for a GitHub action, it's always going to give me old versions of things. Anytime I'm asking it to write a Docker file or a GitHub action, it's always going to show me old versions, because that's all it knows. If that package or that thing didn't even exist 3 years ago, it may not even suggest it or know about it. That's kind of why I'm liking, like, it's almost like right now we need multiple things, right? So I'm using Bard when we had it in ChatGPT with the browser plugin for Edge. Like, I need for the LLMs to have internet. abilities, or at least the LLM model has been updated to this month, this quarter. And we're probably going to get there. Like, I can imagine a service, something like Copilot, where the LLM model is literally getting added to or compiled to, or however they're building it or feeding it the information from the internet, but that I can almost be certain that it knows about Golang 120, Node 20 or whatever, and that it knows about all the packages. It has access to all the package manager. We definitely are going to have to get beyond the feed it everything on the internet related to programming, and then every couple of years we improve the model. Like, we're going to need to fix that. So that's a real problem, and I agree with you. Like, everything I have to have it make that has any level of versioning in it, it's always a wrong version. It's always an old version. And I have to know to go check those versions, update the version, look for any differences between what it knows about the old version and the new version that I'm actually trying to use. So yeah, there's a lot of inefficiencies, but regardless, unless maybe Eric with Java, and I would say previously it would have been me and Node, but I'm a little out to date on the last couple of major Node versions. If you're a senior programmer, I can see how you're a little bit like, yeah, this is garbage. But for adopting new things, man, it was super exhilarating to go from, I can't write this file without a lot of research and refreshing of my Go skills, to 4 hours later having a working tool that does the thing I needed to do. It ingests images and CSVs and puts text on images based on my inputs. It adopts my specific, all the features I wanted in it, like using a special font, using different colors, giving it, centering it rather than left aligning, all the things that I wanted in my little particular program. Each one of them was a problem I needed to solve, and I would ask it and it would help me solve that. Whereas before I would have been Googling, I would have had to, I maybe would have thought about it a little bit. I would have rewrote things 4 or 5 times to try to get it right. Whereas the LLM meant I was only writing it once or twice to get it right. So there's definitely a huge advantage for learning something that you don't know about. So even if you're not a developer, doing this to write Terraform, which have been doing for 2 years now, doing this to write, I haven't really tried to write advanced Docker files with it. That would actually be a fun experiment to see how advanced it could get with multi-stage and a lot of the new copy options, like the copy -- link. It would be interesting to see how well it does at that. Because again, like, a lot of that stuff is less than 3 years old, so it's going to be a struggle. Assad, you're asking about junior DevOps engineer. We previously just go back 15 minutes in the live stream. We talked about this already, but the projects, you just need to find, on my GitHub, github.com/Bret Fisher, I have lots of examples of different various things. All of my courses have you going through examples, deploying different containers, learning about Kubernetes. I don't have any one thing that I send people to. There's Code Killer Code, or Killer Coda. I always forget the name of this thing. This is something that you might be able to use. It has some examples. Lots of different tools have been added. It gives you real playgrounds. So that's KILLR-Coda.com. Oh, KILLER Coda. So their name up here is different than their domain name, but just search Killer Coda. That's maybe one I would check out. Yeah, so on the Windows trivia, Anton was right. It was 3.1.1. I think 3.1.1 was pre-Windows NT 3.5. It was by a couple of years at least, and 3.1.1 was, in my experience, like 3 came out, didn't have TCP/IP, and 3.1.1 was Windows for Workgroups, I believe was the actual product name, and that finally came with an IP stack optionally built in. You still had the NetBIOS, NetBEUI. You can install your Novell NetWare IPX stuff. But it was the first one that had the Windows for Workgroups had the IP stuff built in, where you had like a GUI that you could type in your IP address. And that's why I remember. And then, yeah, I very quickly jumped to NT 3.5, and then NT 4, which was the game changer because Windows NT 4 looked like Windows 95. Yeah, those were good days, man. Everything was exciting. I mean, like it is today. Everything was exciting, but back then it was kind of blowing our minds that we had all kind of shifted from Unix and NetWare, where the admin experience was different than the user experience. The users were starting to get Windows 95, and on the back end we were using command line NetWare servers with like ASCII, at best ASCII interfaces, or really basic server admin interfaces. And if you're on Unix, some of the Unix like HP Unix did have a Solaris-like experience, and then you had a Solaris, of course. But then Windows NT 4 came out, and it was server. I'd had a client, but the server was operated the same way as the user operated their desktop. To me, that was a real game changer for computing and for OSs, was the idea that the pros, like the users, could become pros by learning the client, and that gave them the skills to know the server and the back end because they already learned the interface and where all the stuff was and the settings were. That was the first time I think that really had happened to me, and we instantly adopted NT because we just found it so easy to administrate without actually having read a book or knowing anything about it, because everything was in the GUI. Eric's saying the CKAD and the CKS are best for pure developers, and the CKA is more useful for DevOps and sysadmins. I agree. In fact, I usually recommend to people, because most of the people coming into Kubernetes are coming from a dev world, where I came from the ops world. The people coming in from the dev world, I usually recommend CKAD to them first, because they really don't necessarily, they may and hopefully can avoid operating their own clusters. I mean, if you're an app developer and you just want to deploy apps on Kubernetes, like, you don't want to spend all your time managing the cluster and doing SSHs and cluster updates, right? And managing storage and logs. Ideally, you're working on your app that's running on Kubernetes. So yeah, CKAD all the way. And of course, security. Everything's security. I think everyone should have some sort of security certificate, whether it's cloud specific, whether it's from SANS, SANS, it's one of my favorite organizations for security, or maybe a Security Plus certificate. Nowadays, I think those are less popular and they're more cloud specific, but I think we all should invest a little bit of time in security certifications, even if we're not going to be a security professional, because I have found the leaders in dev teams and the leaders in ops teams really understand the security. Obviously, they know their job, but they also dip their toes into security a lot, because that makes them better at their job. And that allows them to lead others and help guide others through the bad parts of security so that we don't do things wrong. I also think that, at least in America, and Europe is ahead of us, but in America, there's probably more legislation coming that's going to force us to security standards of all companies, not just public companies or government contractors, but all companies, and I think eventually it's going to force us into an industry where we actually might have some security standard certifications that are required to be in the industry, so that you don't do things like ship code with 2,000 vulnerabilities in it, right? Without knowing. I mean, that happens every day. And there's, at this point, really not any excuses for that, as long as we have set up legislation and sort of the sharp edge of the sword, or the the accountability that's necessary in business, so that the devs can't opt out of security. And I don't know if it may be years and years before that actually happens, but just the fact that we've got finally something happening in the White House that allows us to have teeth for companies that are not paying attention to security. That's at least a step in the right direction. Good question. Eric's throwing out the Trumpet windsock. Oh my goodness, that's some skill right there. I remember Trumpet. I don't believe it required 311. I think you could use it as an alternate. I'm catching up on the conversation, but my memory was you could avoid Trumpet and just use the built-in driver that came with 311. It was like a checkbox, right? You had to go in and opt into it. I may be mixing it up, because 311, my memories of 311 versus NT in those days are probably all mushed together. What is the best approach to deliver large amounts of environment variables to Kubernetes clusters? Clusters isolated, no internet connection inside it. I'm going to guess config maps. Config maps with, you're using files with those environment variables, and you're maybe you're, as long as they're not secrets, right? Because you said environment variables, so I'm just going to assume not secrets, but those could be stored in Git, delivered through GitOps. If you don't have Git access, so you can't, if it's air gapped, then maybe you got a registry and you can use something like Flux, which I recently just learned about. Flux being able to pull down configurations for applications, essentially the YAML through a registry, rather than touching Git. So that if you don't have access to a Git-based storage system, you can use an OCI registry-based storage system for your GitOps configurations, and then I would do it file-based, so that it's not like I don't have to like put in some database or make one environment config per environment variable. Ideally, you have an environment, a large, one huge config map, and if they're not secrets, you could even have that config map across services or across deployments. So the same huge config map that's maybe got a superset of all the environment variables for various parts of your app. It just depends on how your apps are structured. But I've seen that where we try to simplify our environment variables by having multiple parts of the same solution or multiple deployments all feeding from the same config map, because we just keep them in one large file. And instead of having one config map per deployment or per container, per pod, right? That's one way to do it. Secrets, they don't get any real easier. You still gonna have to use something like Vault, or you're gonna have to put them in Kubernetes directly somehow. It's still gonna be a pain. Yeah. Or if you're super advanced and you want to do something that's not even inside of Kubernetes, and your app is something where it has its own config management awareness, and there has to be some other service available for your apps when they first start to go retrieve their configuration. That's a pretty advanced model of development, but where you're basically trying to evolve out of hard coding things into container start and having to config maps and secrets in the app, but rather the app knows a discoverability service that it goes pulls all of that information from, so that it's outside of Kubernetes entirely. That's an option too. But then you always have to give it that one variable, right? Where's the location of my configuration, and maybe a secret to get me access to it. So there's always going to be a few. Hope that helps. And I'm sure other people have opinions. That's an opinion. My opinions aren't always correct. So Ahmed's asking, what does an AWS DevOps architect? Well, usually if you label anything with architect, that just means they're senior and that they understand the bigger picture. So I wouldn't think a junior dev or junior DevOps person would be an architect, because an architect to me would be someone who understands they understand storage and databases and networking and systems and application design and front end and back end. They got a wide array of verticals that they are well versed in, and they understand how things relate to each other. So they know that, oh wow, if we're going to use that database and we're going to use this backend to talk to that database, well, we're probably going to need some sort of caching system. So they're going to architect the parts of the solution. The same thing is true of the cloud. If you're a cloud architect, you're someone who knows a lot of the services in that cloud system. So you would have to know a lot more about AWS, and then you're going to work with application architects to help design the system on the back end to meet their needs. So maybe they're asking you if you have what key value services can we use on AWS? And you should be someone that can recommend strategies and tools and solutions for their requirements. So in DevOps, we're usually trying to serve both ops and devs. And if in the case of devs, they're building an application, they need systems and services to provide the things they need for that application. And your job is to sort of work with them. You may know nothing about the language they're writing in, but you know the different cloud services and their pros and cons and when they're used. And so you can help advise them, and essentially you're building out the pieces and moving them together, drawing the lines between them, creating the diagram of all the different parts that are there for the app to run on. That's how I see an architect. But it's a senior job. It's a senior position. If that's what you're asking. I'm not actually sure that's the question you're asking. So if I didn't answer your question, ask it again. OS2 Warp. See, I had very little access to OS2 because I was in military, and OS2 was not making headway in the military, and I saw commercials about Warp, and it looked really cool, but I didn't get a lot of time to play with it. So, Nuno's here. What's up? Let's see, another question. What are the career growth opportunities considering roles in managing Kubernetes on-premise involving Terraform Ansible versus cloud-based Kubernetes Terraform AWS? I think that's all fine. Most larger organizations have both. A lot of organizations are shifting away from cloud, and this is just an ebb and flow. There is no one size fits all for anything, which is why all this is so complex. So when the cloud came out, I was very pro-cloud, but I also understood before we even had the word hybrid, because I'd been doing this enough, and I was a consultant, so I was seeing this happen in companies real time, I didn't think we were ever going to get rid of private data centers, right? We were not going to get rid of data closets. There's just, things local there's a necessary need for things to be local or things to be outside of someone else's purview or on your own systems, all based on your needs and your expertise. So today we have hybrid cloud, and that is either you have multiple clouds or you have on-prem and the cloud. I don't think you investing any time in any of those tools you mentioned is a bad thing. Like, all of those are necessary, whether you're in the data center or the cloud. They're very similar technologies. Terraform, Ansible, Kubernetes, those are all things you can use in both places. So learn them. I mean, it's still relevant to learn VMware. If you want to work at a healthcare company, if you want to work at a government institution, or one of these traditional companies that's not a Netflix and it's not a Google, you're going to be dealing with very traditional architecture still for a very long time, and probably maybe forever. Like, VMware is still a very big company, a very big thing. So I am pro all of it, because we have an insatiable need for technology, servers, bandwidth, data center racks, compute. We can't get enough of it. So I think you're fine with all those. I would say go where your passions lie, unless your passion is to work for a specific company. If you want to work in a specific industry or for a specific type of company, then you need to optimize for what they use. Other than that, learn what you're into and go find a job that uses that. All right? Yeah. Eric's like, a summary is, it's worth $10 a month for Copilot. Yeah. Yeah. I'm lucky to be an open source maintainer, so they actually gifted me Copilot, I have to admit. But I would still pay the $10 a month for it if they made me pay for it. Because I feel like even if I was developing for others as a consultant, which I'm not, but if people were paying me to do that, it would still save me so much time that I would almost maybe regret using it, because then I would bill them less because it would take me less time to make the tools. You hijacked the stream. Everyone's question hijacks the stream. That's the point of this stream. Eric and I, that's a great debate for happy hour, is what's the consensus on 311? I bet you Wikipedia has the answer. Either that or Wayback Machine has the answer on that doesn't come with IP built in. I was just watching a video from let's see, I might have to go back in my YouTube real quick for a second. Into my history from last night that I was watching. But over on man, I really went down a rabbit hole yesterday. I'm looking for a video that I thought was like my last 3 videos. Okay, at LTX, Jeff Gerling made a really great video. Let me just pull this up. This is actually a pretty cool, fun video. It was actually at first I was like, oh, he's just diarying, he's just sort of diarying his experience at LTX conference. And, but man, I was watching it with a lot of FOMO because it looked so much fun to play with all this hardware. You got to make your own screwdriver from parts with machines, like a manufacturing setup. It actually had me realizing I didn't really know anything about this conference. But listening to Jeff talk about it was actually really cool. So talk about hijacking the stream. Like this is the kind of thing that we could have a whole discussion about and talk about. Oh, and the whole point there. Sorry, let me bring it full circle. They have an area where there was every version of Windows. Let's see if I can find that. They had like a let me see if I can find this part in the video because I thought it was pretty impressive. Yeah, there were somewhere in the beginning here that you could make your own Ethernet cables at the event. There was a case throwing contest. Oh, there we go. Oh, right there. So this was every version of Windows, I believe, going back to at least version 3. And it was a husband and wife team that put up these stations and described the version of Windows and had it running on computers, which amazing. Like that sounds like a ton of work. I thought it was really cool, but maybe reach out to that couple. They would definitely know because they had to set up a 311 station. All right, I really do want to. Here's another. I think I'm not so sure if this is a question or a statement. This is a wish list. Ahmed's asking. I really do want to see a whole course on Udemy based on real-world professional projects. I hope that you'll prepare this gift for us, Bret. Yeah, the challenge is. It's hard. But project-based courses are the hardest courses, and the question is, can I get paid enough in making that course on Udemy to make it worth it? That's a real tough thing to work out. That's why you don't see a lot of advanced training on Udemy, because making an advanced course is way more work than a beginner course. And a little secret in the training industry, advanced courses don't sell well. So you could make like a basic Kubernetes, advanced Kubernetes. The advanced one will always just sell about a third of the amount, or a fourth of the amount as the beginner one. But the advanced one, assuming that they're the same length, the advanced one took way more work to make because it's advanced. So it takes so much more time to get things right and to build out the sample projects. So you're essentially almost guaranteeing that you won't make good money on it. And so that's why the beginner courses are where it's at, because that's what everybody buys, and that's what is probably the most easiest to make. I hear you, though. I'd love to make that course. If someone just paid me a bunch of money to make that course, I would totally love to do it. But the trick is if I did it, how could I make it worth its time? And this is a good time for an ad. That's why I made this course. This course is that. It does give you the basics of GitHub Actions and Argo CD and what GitOps is. But the whole purpose of this course is to get as close to real world as possible and give you real templates that you can use in your real projects. And then we work together on it live in Zoom, and you can bring your real projects from work to the Zoom calls and have the group help you with it. Like this is exactly that kind of thing. Now, is it cheap? No, it is not $10 like a Udemy course is, but that's what it takes to really build this high-end, almost like a private consultant level knowledge in a course. So that's why I have these. I don't have one yet for Docker or Kubernetes, but if this one is a hit and it goes well, like I hope it does, and we get enough people that are willing to spend that kind of money to do serious learning, not just something I might learn someday, but like I'm going to learn this right now for 2 weeks with Bret and the team. If that works well, then I will make one on Docker and Kubernetes and other things. Like there's no reason why I can't have a bunch of these and do them over and over again. I would love to do that, but people have to be willing to shed out the money, and I think that's really one of the challenges. Is people are so used to the cheap stuff on the internet and YouTube's that they don't want to spend the money or ask the company for money to hire an expert. So we'll see. We'll see. People vote with their money, and I still make way more money on Udemy than I do on my Maven course. So people vote with their money. Happy Hour will fire up a DOS box and install 311. The drinking game will be everyone drinks for each floppy disk swap and system reboot. Oh, well, if we did that, then we definitely couldn't install Office 95 because then that would be like 25 floppies, 3-inch floppies, and then we would definitely not remember anything from that night. I remember, so I worked on a Navy ship for 5 years. That's where I got a lot of my original help desk and server admin shops. And because it was a Navy ship, and it was a large one, it had 1,000 people on it. So you had to walk from one end to the other was going to take you 10 minutes, right? So if you had to go fix someone's computer, we had tool bags, and in that tool bag was a spare mouse, because this is the beginning of the mouse days. This was Windows 3.1, Windows NT 4, and the networks were pretty slow, right? They were 10 meg hubs, so you weren't gonna move any packets really fast, and there was a lot of collisions. We had one big broadcast domain for 1,000. It's more like 300 computers. So we would walk around with tool bags, and we had rubber bands wrapped around a Windows install set of floppies, a Microsoft Office set of floppies. We had with a NetWare install, all various utilities. So we were the installer, and we carried all these floppies in what was like an electrician's tool bag. And we'd have a copy, because these things wear out. You use them enough, and they wear out or they get damaged. So like about every couple of months, we would have to recopy and remake all these installations, and we would have like essentially a copy party, where we would have special computers that had like multiple floppy drives in it, so you could read from one and write to the other. You all probably remember this, or you had like a CD-ROM drive that was a read-only CD-ROM and then a write CD-ROM, and so that way you could do it as fast as you wouldn't have to copy to the hard drive first. You could do it from disk to disk. And we would have to do all this for a dozen people. We had a dozen or so. We had about a dozen installers and tech support there. And so we would have to have these days where it spent the entire day remaking all of our installations for our bags, so we could walk around with all these things, because we didn't have the storage space or the network speed to put it all on the network. But the minute that happened, we were able to stop carrying those bags, and it was so much better. Like, it was just, and we didn't have portable hard drives. Like, it just wasn't really a thing. Back in the days of, back then we had bigger hard drives. They weren't even 3.5. They were these 5-inch giant, really slow hard drives that would have like 100 or 200 meg on them. Where can I find freelance jobs for only Docker? Don't know. Sorry, Reaper Gaming. I get my consulting through my network, because I've been doing this forever. So people find me because I conference speak, I do this live stream, I sell courses, and so they reach out to me, and I tend to have enough work there. But before that, I was using all the freelance job boards. So nothing special about that, right? I was just using Elance and whatever it's called now, and all those kind of things to find clients, and I would just look for the ones that needed Docker skills. But nowadays it's probably more than Docker. It's like you would probably need to know Docker, Kubernetes, maybe some Terraform, lots of YAML. You'd want to know Helm, stuff like that. And then maybe you could find a job where they really just were trying to implement these tools, and they needed someone to improve them or to implement them for them or whatever. But I started out, before Docker. I was doing all the tradition. I was doing the old school sysadmin consulting, and building out cloud infrastructure, and building out, we were using Puppet, Chef. We started using Ansible, and then Terraform, and then Docker came along. So that's how I got into it. I don't really, and then back then I was always looking for jobs. One of the other things you can do is you can find a consulting company that hires subcontractors, and maybe they need a Docker person part-time, but not full-time. So they will sub that out, and they find the clients. You get less money, but you don't have to do the work of finding a client. and they go, and you're just a part of their team. And so when they need you, they bring you in. I did that for a very long time, probably 5 years, 6 years, maybe even 7 years, as a part-time, way to make money when I was doing the other things. And so between my own, and then once I had my own client base, I was able to drop those consulting companies because they tend to pay you less because they're doing all the sales and they're doing the work, and you're just there to bill hourly, and then they have to mark you up so they can make money on you. Thank you so much for all the thank yous. Like, I really appreciate it. Yeah. That's why I do it. I do all this stuff because I want to help others. So pass it on. Go help somebody, or go buy somebody's stuff, or go support somebody on Patreon or on GitHub. If you have a couple extra bucks, go support somebody in open source, creating free training or open tools or whatever, or go and help others. Jump into my Discord server and answer somebody's questions, or go over to Stack Overflow and answer somebody's questions before it dies. I don't know. Has anyone used the new Stack Overflow AI? I haven't had a chance to try it. I don't even know if it's public. I was just curious if anybody had any experience on that. Oh, wow. Well, did you get to go to LTX? Oh, that Whales exhibit was so impressive. I mean, it sounds like you were there. It certainly looks like a lot of fun. I actually, until watching Jeff's video, I didn't know what that conference was really about. So that made me convinced that that's a life goal, to just go hang out with other hardware nerds. And yeah. Thanks, Nuno. Thanks for the shout out. Could I provide a course which shows Azure, DevOps, Docker, Kubernetes, and OpenShift? You're probably going to find a course on OpenShift and then a course on Azure DevOps. I don't know. I don't have any of those kind of courses. I don't teach Azure. I don't teach OpenShift. I don't use Azure very often, and I never have used OpenShift. So, yeah, it's not going to be me. But there are definitely OpenShift courses on Udemy, and Udemy definitely has Azure DevOps courses. So I would check Udemy first. YouTube is obviously a great place. That's where I spend most of my time. Udemy, managing my own courses. YouTube, learning from others. I spend a lot of time on YouTube. Probably more time on YouTube now than on blogs. I used to be much more of a blog reader, but blogging has, I feel like, really declined in quality over the years. So I think I probably spend more time reading stuff on LinkedIn now than I do actually reading, Medium posts. Just because the quality, the bar has, now that blogging is full on a marketing thing, a lot of times the blog articles are just a marketing piece, and the person has a cursory knowledge of the thing, and they checked off to do it their job to write a blog. So Eric's not like that. Eric's blog posts are good on Sneak's blog, but I have a hard time finding blogs. Back in the day, we all had RSS readers. I had a list of 20 people. I would read their blog entries, and they would always be really in depth and very thoughtful, and I did the same. I had break fix type of blogging where I would describe a solution to a problem I had, and hopefully it helped others. The reality is that's kind of a thankless job, and it doesn't really drive consistent traffic. It doesn't create community. And so I realized a long time ago that in order to create community, I had to do things like a live stream and a YouTube channel and a Discord server, stuff like that. So I definitely don't blog as much as I used to, or read other people's blogs as much as I used to. So I don't know what to do about your course request other than to say check out YouTube and Udemy for those. Oh, never went to LTX. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that exhibit was dope. I mean, it looked like it was made by by Microsoft. It was pretty cool. Yeah, Nuno's is it WSL.dev? It's good stuff. Anyone who's running their own blog on their own platform, essentially, it's usually going to be good. The challenge is we're all so busy nowadays. We're all attention starved. So, there's very few blogs where people are writing something every month or every other week or something like that. It's like whenever I find someone, I find their website, I'm like, oh, they got a blog, cool. I meet someone new at a conference or whatever, I go to their blog, and it's like their last post was 2021, and then the one before that was 2018. It just seems like in the last, ever since COVID, before that, it's like blogging has really I felt like it started to take a back seat. And now we've got bots writing blog posts, so it's even worse. Oh, and you're writing on Dev2? Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of these cool places like Dev2 that are working hard to create little communities, and I really appreciate that. I sadly don't spend enough time there, like I should. And every once in a while, like Hacker Noon, I like the Hacker Noon stuff. I check there every once in a while for whatever the latest front page is. Yeah, Reaper's asking about. I mean, my mainframe background was 30 years ago. Is there any possibility for a future course on the containerization on IBM Cloud? I mean, can you? I don't even know. I've literally never used IBM Cloud. Can you create a container on an IBM mainframe on IBM Cloud? I don't even know. I mean, I don't. I know that back in the late 2000s, when I was still in the government agency, we had an IBM mainframe still for a lot of things. This was 2008, 2009, and we the mainframe admins had partitioned off a slice or whatever they call it for some Linux VMs. So that was exciting. And now you can run Docker on that, but I've never done it. I've never touched one. So. A great static website generator. Hugo. I know a lot of people that like Hugo. I have used Hugo. GitHub Pages is a very popular one with Jekyll. I actually have a pretty popular Jekyll Docker container for some reason. I did it as sort of like scratching my own itch, and then it became popular, and now when it breaks, people actually complain, or not complain, but they just let me know that it's broken. So I mean, if it was me, I'd probably do Jekyll or Hugo. I use Ghost, which is not technically a static blog generator. I would also, if it was me today, I like the idea of Hugo. So I would, and I believe that the new GitHub Pages now allows you to. Basically, what you would do now is what I would do. I'm going to put it in a Git repo. I'm going to use GitHub Actions to do the builds, and move and do whatever GitHub needs me to do, wherever it needs me to move the pages to, or put them in a branch, or put them in a directory, and then rely on GitHub Pages. And I believe that the new GitHub Pages builder is more flexible and can support more than Jekyll. Someone, I'm sure, Nuno or somebody is probably going to help me clue me in on this, because I haven't really paid attention. Because my blogs run on Ghost. But if I go into like one repo and I go into, can I search for a feature? Pages. So on GitHub Pages, it used to be that you could only use Jekyll. and Jekyll's Ruby. So if you try to get fancy with Jekyll, some people just don't want to deal with Ruby. And it also can have performance problems, which I've actually experienced with different Ruby versions and different versions of Jekyll mismatched. This actually happened last year to me. It could greatly affect the speed of building a large site. And there's so this beta, this is what I'm talking about. Hugo, Hugo, yeah. Oh, sorry, you're just correcting yourself, Nuno. Sorry. The GitHub Actions, best for using frameworks and customizing your build process. So GitHub Actions beta pages. I just saw this, this is a year old. Custom GitHub Actions workflows. You can now deploy to a GitHub Pages site directly from repositories using GitHub Actions without needing to set up a publishing source. Using Actions to orchestrate pages, publishing provides many more options than choosing your authoring framework, like the ones I was mentioning: Next, Gatsby, Nuxt.js. So right now, for example, I'm experimenting with Slide Dev for us. Technically, it's still a static site generator, but the site is slides. I use sli.dev. This is my new slide presentation framework, so it's in Markdown-ish. It's definitely for developers. It's a little more involved than some of the other ones like Remark and I can't remember the other ones that I'd used in the past, but it makes beautiful slides. It's a little bit involved to learn a little, but once you get into it, it's like every one of these static site generators. It takes a little bit for you to learn the vocabulary. But I've recently made 200 slides in a talk, and it just runs on a website. In the past, I have been using static site hoster that I'm forgetting. I have to go look it up because I'm realizing that I should remember the name of it. Netlify is what I've been using for years, but I think now that GitHub Pages supports GitHub Action builds of any framework, I will probably experiment with GitHub Pages over Netlify just to keep it all in one tool. I mean, Netlify is great, and I've never paid them a dime, and they have been serving my slides for dozens of talks and workshops for, since 2016. So that's a long time. But it's an unnecessary step. I have to go between two sites, and I have to, why not just do it all on GitHub? So I'm probably going to try that next. Yeah. And I think, honestly, a lot of times when it comes down to which one of those frameworks to use for your static site, it's almost like which language and framework speaks to you. It's not really so much about which one is the best or which one has more than the others. I find that eventually, if you're going to use a static site generator, you will eventually have to write some code, because you will eventually want something on your site that you can't get with just a simple plugin or a built-in theme feature. So you're going to want a custom theme of some sort. You're going to want a custom add-in that pulls in something that's not automatically built in as a feature out of the box, and you're going to end up writing code. So if you're a developer, I would probably find one in a language that you're willing to write in, because you may end up there if you have a significantly fancy enough site. If you're just doing something simple, where it's just a simple blog, you're starting from scratch, you're not even moving content over, I think that any of them would work, and Jekyll is certainly a very popular one. I think the second most popular I hear about is Hugo, but the other ones are all pretty big as well. So I don't think any of them will disappoint you. I worked on a container boat for 5 years. It was fate. We didn't have any containers on our boat, but it was definitely a boat. It was a ship in the water, and we did have containers on the pier, because a lot of the contractors that repair vessels work out of containers or have their parts in containers. So there was containers everywhere, not on our boat specifically, but I know what you mean. Yeah, I was in the Navy, and that's where I got my start. I skipped university and went through the military as a means for vocational training. and on-the-job training. And then when I got out, by the time I got out, I had a bunch of Microsoft certs, and I was working on my Cisco cert, and went straight into private. Worked for a healthcare company in 2000. That's what I was doing on the eve of 2000, when everyone thought the ATMs were going to blow up or whatever. I was managing 120 routers at a healthcare company and a bunch of servers, making sure nothing went down when the clock struck midnight. All right. So we've been on 90 minutes. I'm gonna call last round. I need like not that. Not a crickets. I need sort of like the ding 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 sort of last round dinner bell. If you have any last minute questions, again, I will just spit off some of the things that are going to happen in our community. Over on Discord, we've got multiple events coming up on Discord. Let me just show you those. If you sign up to our Discord server, a lot of you are already there. Thank you. You can jump into the events. You can see that we've got next week just posted. We are going to have Garden on to talk about their CI approach to Kubernetes and developer automation. We've got the monthly High Fivers chat. You have to subscribe on this channel or Patreon or on my website as a member for High Fivers to get access to that. That is a monthly hangout in Discord on video where we just chat about projects that we're working on. There might be 3 people, there might be 9 people. We don't typically have over a dozen, so that's pretty unusual. So it's a nice small group. You can get attention. You can bring your projects. You can bring your questions. You can bring your code. We will help you, and we do that once a month. It's $5 a month to get in that, $5 US. You can subscribe right on this channel right now and do that. And so we're doing that August 16th. That's a couple of weeks. Obviously, we've got lots of YouTube live shows coming. We also have our Swarm Fans monthly meetup coming in a month, almost in a month. And then we have on the show, I mentioned Garden. We've also got Ufizzy coming up, talking about preview environments, GitHub Actions, and ephemeral environments. What else we got? We've got Multipass coming in. We're going to talk about, we've had Multipass on the show before, but we're going to talk about Canonical's Ubuntu installer. Essentially, my favorite way to create local VMs is Multipass. It's super fast. It's a one-liner. It instantly creates it. If I want to do Kubernetes, I might use something else like Docker Desktop or Kind, Kubernetes in Docker, K-I-N-D, or my favorite, honestly, is K3D, Kubernetes, K3S, or keys inside of Docker. But if I just need a regular Ubuntu machine, a full OS, full VM, I'm using Multipass. They're going to be on the show again to talk about all the latest features since they were on the show like 2 years ago, I think. And then, of course, next week, Nirmal will be back and as my co-host, and we'll have next week Garden, and then the week after that, we're going to have a cloud native Q&A where he and I just do this. We talk to you. Then we're going to have Ken Collins on, who is an AWS serverless hero. We're going to talk about Lambda with containers and shipping containers through Lambda and using Lambda for your container deployments. And he's excited about that. We've been talking for a while. He's a local friend. He actually lives in my area. So we will do it virtually, but we could technically do it physically. I just don't have the setup here for 2 mics and 2 cameras, but that would be a fun episode to set that up, because there's not a lot of people in my area that focus on this stuff, but there's more people are doing it every day. So I could make an IRL show. Yeah, Eric's got a +1 for Multipass. It's a very, very easy tool to use. One of the things I liked about it back when I first started using it was instead of Docker Machine, remember that tool? Docker Machine, depending on what networking or what VM tool you were using in the background, would give a random, or it would give the IPs to the VMs in order of their startup. And if you were running a Kubernetes or a Swarm cluster, you wanted the IPs to be permanent. On a Mac, with the built-in defaults of Multipass, the IP is fixed, so it's nice because you can set up a swarm or a cluster of Kubernetes, and the IPs will work. And then when you reboot them, they will stay working. That was actually one of the reasons I liked it out of the box, was it was super easy to run like Docker machine, and it had essentially permanently assigned IP addresses. Yeah, Lima and yeah, if you're on Windows with WSL, you have other options to simulate multiple OSs. That's definitely true, Nuno. And, check out our video. Nuno and I on this channel have a video all about Windows 11 and Docker, and we talk about WSL a lot. It's the most popular video on my channel. So check that out. Let's just look up Nuno here in this channel. And I'm going to leave it at that. That's the last comment. So thank you everyone for being here. Again, we'll be live next week. And sign up on all my newsletters and hang out in Discord. Come hang out with us in Discord right there. I'll see you live next week. Ciao, everybody.